Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, Columbus City Schools and the Commission of Black Girls at Columbus Public Health welcome you to Say My Name, Deconstructing the Black Girls Experience. Inspired by the film Pushout, tonight's presentation and panel discussion feature 6 prominent and emerging trailblazing African American female voices leading the charge for change. And now, please welcome your host, Board of Education President, parent of a CCS student, and all-around black girl magic, Jennifer Adair.
Good evening, everyone. I am so excited to be here tonight. Are you excited? Let's hear it. It is my honor to be here to celebrate the resilience of the black girl and young women across this city. Welcome to the Say My Name, Deconstructing the Black Girl Experience, an event and panel discussion centered around the film Pushout by Dr. Monique Morris, who is here with us this evening. Will you go ahead? I can't see you, but maybe they can. There she is. And again, my name is Jennifer Adair. I am your board president. I am a parent of the district. I am the daughter of a teacher, and I am a graduate, and I am a proud black girl product of our district. Part of our job as Board of Education members is to advocate on behalf of all of our students, and knowing that keeping the focus on really eliminating systemic racism and impact on all of our students, in particular black girls, is central to our work as board members. I am so honored to host this incredible event this evening, and you being here really shows that you care about these issues as well. I want all the black girls to stand for a moment. You know, go ahead, I can't see you, but I want you to do it. You know what, girls? Black girls are magic. Black girls soar. Black girls rock. Each and every one of you. And collectively, we are a powerful voice, and that's what you're going to see tonight. We have 6 trailblazing and emerging female voices within the Central Ohio African American black community, and the black magic is real, and I'm excited for you to see them tonight on the panel. I really want to thank each of you for joining us tonight. I want to give a special thank you to our partners who made this event possible. Dr. Mashika Roberts and the Commission on Black Girls for co-sponsoring this event. And your team, I know you have members of your team here tonight. And to the NEA for their support in this work. I also want to thank, obviously, our wonderful Afrocentric Early College Learning Center for hosting us. And I know we have Mr. Tennant, who's somewhere in the audience, who is there he is, he's over there, who is why this school is here, right? And I know that he believes in black girls, and that is why this building exists, and this school and this program is here. I also want to thank our Urban Strings, who, amazing, right? Amazing performance outside. And of course, if you enjoyed the tasty snacks, our downtown high school culinary students provided that for you. And again, they are so amazing learning and showing you everything that they can do. So thank you to everyone who made the outside reception happen, and thank you for enjoying. So in 2019, PBS released the documentary Pushout, the criminalization of black girls in schools. Based on the book of the same name, the film exposed the inequitable treatment of black girls in the education system. It also highlighted programs implemented across the country working to develop solutions that facilitate healing. Let's take a look. Ladies and gentlemen, Pushout.
This video went viral, but incidents like this can be found throughout America. The criminalization of black girls in schools disrupts one of the most important factors in their lives: education. I would like for schools to become locations for healing so that they can become locations for learning.
These young women, they are pushing up against racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, xenophobia.
I've asked girls if they felt that teachers were afraid of them. And some girls will say yes, their teachers are afraid of them. And then they laugh, because why would an adult be afraid of a child?
And the word of the week is condone. Condone us.
As a nation, talking about the school-to-prison pipeline for Black boys and Latino boys, but absent of that conversation
What we learn, Emma?
was how girls of color and Black girls in particular were being impacted.
What that then did was send the message that what's happening to girls isn't necessarily a crisis.
What's crazy is that there are 300 girls in this school. Good majority of girls here are Black, and they go through a lot. And I know they go through a lot because they're Black. They live in America.
My teacher got super duper mad and dragged me by the chair, yelled at the other kids to move, and dragged me all the way outside.
Oftentimes, I'm gonna say what they don't see is they just refuse to see Black girls as being somebody able to be harmed. My harm can actually be like, come at me and I'm coming for you.
I was known for fighting. I had a big mouth. Like, I would just put up a front like I was so angry, but deep down inside, I was really depressed and I was really sad.
We know there's a higher number of assaults against Black girls. They're more likely to be trafficked. They're more likely to be molested. They're more likely to fall into so many different categories that affect their ability to learn.
I actually got caught up with a pimp for 3 days, but I knew it was so wrong. I just didn't want to be here no more.
You push a girl out of school and you push her into the streets. You push her into violence, you push her into trauma.
Whereas I felt like we needed to approach any of our interventions from they are capable, they are strong, they are vulnerable.
It matters.
They are worth protecting.
Even though you think you're doing racial justice work, if you're not talking about girls, you're not doing racial justice work.
The question is whether we believe that certain children need surveillance and policing and punitive responses, and other kids get to explore who they are.
Black lives matter worldwide till the end of time. We rising up. Can't nobody stop us. The love we got's colossal. We rising up.
So tonight is about awareness. It's about really examining the inequitable treatment and the negative impact on the life trajectory of Black girls, our Black girls right now in Columbus and in the Columbus community. Did you know, according to studies, Black girls are entering the juvenile justice system at an alarming rate. And we know it starts at school. There's also only a few groups of Black girls that are experiencing overrepresentation in this discipline at school compared to their peers at the same educational level. Ultimately, we know that entering this system impacts not only their health and wellness at that time, but their future trajectory in every aspect of their life after. But we can turn this around, can't we? And we have so many people that are trying to do that. Black girls in our community can demonstrate extraordinary resilience. Black girls in this room have too. We are resilient. There is an abundance of stellar examples of Black girls who have overcome barriers and are making incredible choices. By bringing awareness to this issue, exposing our children to new opportunities, putting words about what is actually happening in the systems. We can wrap them in support. We will not leave their side. And we can affect change. And we can do it together. Here in Columbus City Schools, we work with so many of you, our community partners, to support our girls and our Black girls in particular. We engage with Nationwide Children's Hospital for mental health services and support. We founded the Columbus Prep School for Girls in 2010, and if you haven't been there, I suggest you go. They are amazing. We also have conversations through podcasts and supporting different programming within schools with our partners to have these conversations. We are encouraging our students through partners like COSI to engage in careers or pathways that might not feel open to them, such as STEM. And of course, we work with other partners to be able to talk about issues that only women really know, such as when we worked with Councilmember Brown to ensure that we provided free sanitary products for all girls across the district. These things are incredibly important. One of the leaders of this moment, of this movement, is Priscilla Tyson, our former city council member and founder of the Commission on Black Girls. She believed that our community can never reach greatness unless all members meet their full potential, and our Black girls are at the top.
Talk about people having an impact, you talk about great things that are achieved, and then you look at people who have a legacied life. It's really hard to pick one thing to show how Councilwoman Tyson impacted society. You have to look at her catalog of content of impact over decades-long public service career. If you're forcing me to highlight one thing, well, I had the pleasure of working with her and the other distinguished commission members on the Commission on Black Girls. And that is a signature program that not only was based on research, evaluation, and then what can we do to solve and improve the lives of Black women in Columbus, it actually is a roadmap and a textbook case, a clinic in fact, of how other urban cities and any city across the US could do that for marginalized kiddos and marginalized communities, and in this case, Black girls.
The Commission on Black Girls, she thought of bringing together the powers that be in this city to look at every aspect of the life of Black women and girls, whether it's in healthcare or the judicial system or education, to bring those folks together for about 2 years to study those issues and come up with recommendations.
Through being a driving force and always giving me words of encouragement in the Commission on Black Girls and Young Women, I have felt solidly integrated into my own community, as I felt like very separated from it before. Seeing a lot of other Black girls that are like me and have had the same struggles as me and even different struggles, I got to learn and kind of gauge what other girls are going through, and it really helped me open the door to, I'm not alone. I'm here with other girls that have the same struggles as me, and I'm able to overcome that, and now I'm able to be a driving force for other Black girls that may struggle with their identity or being biracial and say, hey, I know where you're coming from, but we can definitely make a change. You can identify with your Blackness.
Good evening. I am Talisa Dixon, the proud superintendent of Columbus City Schools, and I am so proud to be here today to recognize the work and contributions of Priscilla R. Tyson. Her contributions to effect positive change in the lives of Black girls in Columbus and Central Ohio. In 2008, Columbus City Council adopted a resolution to create the Commission on Black Girls. It was the culmination of a vision and then Council member Priscilla Tyson. She was on a mission focused on changing the trajectory of Black girls in Columbus and ending the cycle of generational poverty. The commission, chaired by Dr. Frederick Bartley, and of COSI, and Fran Frazier from Rise Sister Rise, led a process to explore the quality of life for Black girls in Columbus and Central Ohio. and the results of that. A first of its kind document produced by a city government entity, the Quality of Life of Black Girls Report. That deserves a round of applause. With this, Councilmember Tyson set a national precedent. She publicly declared that we will acknowledge the inequities facing Black girls and work together to effect change. Priscilla Tyson, a graduate of Eastmoor High School, brought the conversation out of the shadows and into the forefront. From the Commission to the Crown Act, to declaring racism a public health crisis, we are talking and taking action for our Black girls and young ladies here in Columbus. Priscilla Tyson, this is for you and your service. And she is here. Where are you? Can you come up? There she is. Come on up.
I just want to say thank you. I certainly did not know that I was coming here to be recognized. I was coming here to, they said to say just a few words about the report. So thank you very much for this honor, and it has been an honor and a privilege to serve this community, but I certainly did not do it alone. There's so many women in this audience today that served on the commission. I know Fran is here, but I know that so many people here served on the Commission for Black Girls and also have been truly helping me and supporting me over my almost 15 years on Columbus City Council. So I really do thank you for the service. I've always said Columbus City Schools is our #1 partner, and especially I want to also mention Alicia Gillison, who was also on that commission and just really was instrumental in helping us to move this report forward. So thank you very much. I'm very, very happy to be here, and I won't be able to stay very long. This is the first time I'm putting even shoes on besides tennis shoes to come out. So thank you so much. I'm honored and privileged to receive this award. May God continue to bless you. We want to make sure that we support our Black girls. We love our Black girls, and we want to continue to make sure that our girls have every opportunity to be successful. So thank you, and God bless you.
Good evening. My name is Stephanie Patton, and I'm the school leadership coach for Region 2. Thank you. I just wanted to welcome everyone and to reshare our purpose is really to provide nurturing and caring spaces for Black girls within Columbus City Schools, and how important it is to have partnerships with Fran Frazier, the Commission on Black Girls, Columbus Public Health, and all those who have sown into our girls. And I think what is wonderful about this event is that we have Black women in positions of power. So I encourage us to have some discourse and some conversation, not only to heal ourselves so that we can help others, but let's talk about the work and make the change. And so Columbus City Schools has been instrumental. We were honored to be featured in Pushout as a school that's doing it right. I was honored to be the principal of Miss Emma, who is graduating this year. So doing great things. And that's what it's all about. It's about the Black girls that we serve and sewing into them so that they could surpass anything that we're doing. And so when Columbus City Schools talks about students leading the way, this is a prime example. And when they talk about Portrait of a Graduate, these characteristics that they are challenging us to sow into our students will excel them beyond great heights. So with that, I say thank you for coming, and we will get to the panel.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for all of your work and commitment to our Black girls here at Columbus City Schools. I am now very honored to introduce the moderator for tonight's event, our panel, Ms. Tracy Townsend. Tracy is a multiple Emmy Award-winning news anchor and medical correspondent at WBNS 10 TV CBS, where she is part of the Wake Up C-Bus team. Tracy hosts Face the State, a political affairs show on WBNS TV, where she and her team have won several awards, including the prestigious Walter Cronkite Award for Excellence in Television Political Journalism in 2013 for their voter education efforts. A Cincinnati native and a graduate of The Ohio State University, Townsend makes service in the community a priority, having been a Susan G. Komen Columbus affiliate board member and serving as MC for several events throughout Columbus, Ohio. Additionally, she is an active life member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated and president of the Columbus, Ohio chapter of the Lynx Incorporated, one of the nation's oldest and largest volunteer women's service groups. Ladies and gentlemen, Black Girl Magic herself, Tracy Townsend.
Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Okay, I want just a little more because this is going to be a big night. Good evening. That's what I'm talking about. So you all heard I do Wake Up C-Bus, so you know it's a little past my bedtime, but this is worth it. I am so excited for this panel tonight. I watched Pushout, made the mistake, as I've shared with a few people, of watching it at my desk at work and had to turn it off and go fix my lashes. Because you know, Black Girl Magic can, get a little melted, but we can all fix it back up. So we have an incredible panel, and it is my pleasure to get ready to present them to you because I know you know all of these fantastic professionals who are here in our city. We're going to start with the Columbus Public Health Commissioner, Dr. Mashika Roberts. We follow with Stephanie Patton, who you know is a school leadership coach and former principal at Columbus City Schools. And the chief is here, Kimberly Spears McNatt, Chief of Police, The Ohio State University. Next, please welcome to our stage, Dr. Amina Kemavor, Dr. K as she is known, Vice President, Advocacy and Engagement at Adam H. Dr. K is a licensed professional clinical counselor. And we called each other because we coordinate. And a real rock star, Emma Arnold, Columbus City Schools, soon to be graduate, Fort Hays. And Dr. Monique Morris, President, CEO, Grant Makers for Girls of Color and co-founder of the National Black Women's Justice Institute, Pushout, Women in the Room Productions. We are so glad that you are here. One round of applause before we get started for this panel. All right, ladies, please take your seats. So we'll start kind of in order, but then we'll just kind of dive into this. I want to start with Dr. Morris and have you talk about how we got to this point. When we talk about the mistreatment of girls, can you give us the historical perspective?
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for having me here in the city. I love to come to Columbus, and this is certainly a special space. I like to anchor the conversation about how we've arrived at this moment where Black girls are disproportionately experiencing exclusionary discipline, the way that we describe in the film and in the book, the sort of compounded traumas that tend to float beneath folks' radar when we're talking about Black girls. I like to anchor all of that in the vestiges and legacies of slavery that invited into the public consciousness this reading of Black girlhood as disposable and this reading of Black girl bodies as public. And this treatment of Black girl bodies as public. All of the way that we have misunderstood Black girlhood play into how we engage Black girls. All of how we have constructed systems that respond to Black girlhood as if it is not something that is worthy of protection and love is how we arrive at this moment. So when we think about historical legacies of institutional bias, structures of oppression, communities that have been grappling to survive, we often think about Black girls being at the center of many of those articulations around justice. I like to say that Black girls are some of our most consistent historical figures, if you will, who have spoken up and engaged in a conversation about what justice looks like. And because of that norm, when Black girls speak up, it's not something that's foreign to other Black women or Black girls, but it's not something that is readily received as a part of what we constitute as good girlhood. And so because of that, there's a lot of punishment that comes along with the ability to speak up. A lot of my work in this space has been around recognizing and trying to map the way that plays out in different institutions and in different scenarios. But one thing I'll say that's for certain is that Black girls themselves recognize that as a strength. And I'm so happy that we continue to see our ability as girls to speak up against conditions of oppression as a strength, that even when it is received by the public as something that is less than desirable, our young people still understand that that is a core part of who they are and how they can engage. It does come, magic comes at a price sometimes. And so what what we have to do and what I believe our call is, and why I have written the books and done the pods and done the videos and done all the things that I do in this space, including now in philanthropy and funding organizations, is because I want us not to see Black girls succeed despite what is going on in their lives, but because of what is going on in their lives.
Say that again. That was good. Not in spite of, but because of.
Yes, I'm sorry. I did. Rhetorical.
No, that was good. That was good. No, this is a little like church, call and response. We're going to really get into it. So I'm watching the panel, and I'm seeing that this resonates with some of you. Does anybody want to speak to what we just heard?
I'll speak to it. I think that goes with what we need to understand as educators as generational trauma. And so not only when we are triaging our students and caring for our students, we have to offer that same grace and mercy to the parents and make sure that we understand the lineage in which we come from and some of those things that we're doing. So again, not only addressing the whole child, but the whole family. So I think sometimes we overlook that in the moment, but I think it's a very incremental part to when we're servicing our students to make sure that we understand the generational things that have been passed down from the historical and the structural norms that, have put us in a box. And when our, this new generation is coming out of that box, for us to look for ways to support them. And so when we're meeting with parents, that it's not adversarial, but it's supportive, and that we're working toward the common cause, and that the student and the parent understand, that we are there to support them as well.
Can we talk? Sure, go ahead. Can we talk about, you both have talked about these structural norms and conditions. Can you give us examples for people who may not be familiar?
Yeah. So when we talk about structural harms, so one of the things that I like to do is think about, when we think about oppression, think about all the ways that it manifests. It manifests in individual interactions, it manifests in structural systems, right? Organizations, institutions, and we think about how it manifests culturally and also in internalized ways. So those are the four primary ways that we see oppression manifest in our lived experience. With structural oppression, when I talk about historical structures and systems, what I'm talking about are the decisions and policies and organizations that have been built without consideration for the life and engagement and cultures of Black girls that do cause harm when we are responding to Black girls. An example of that is actually in the film when we talk about how one of our young people that we profile tells her story of being commercially sexually exploited and sex trafficked the way that we talk about it today. I hope everyone in the room understands that there is no such thing as a child prostitute. That young people who are trafficked experience a host of traumas and harms that typically start with early sexual violence in their lives. Our systems see young people who are on the street as prostitutes and therefore violators of law. And so our systems respond to these girls not as survivors of sexual violence, but rather as those who are in operation against the law. Obviously, there's been a lot of work to try to overcome that, to reverse some of those spaces, but that's an example in the film where we see, and also in the book, where young people who are experiencing that kind of harm and that kind of trauma, girls especially, are seen and responded to just as if they are criminals. So they are criminalized as a function of their response to their early childhood sexual violence. And also then, because for many girls who cycle in and out of the system or the juvenile court system, going to school becomes a part of their condition of probation. If they don't go to school, then they are seen as violating the conditions of probation, which then can worsen or deepen the reprimands against them. They can be in violation of their court order, and then they can also be put in detention as a function of that. What I try to describe in the book is the complicated nature of all of this. One, to help us recognize when Black girls experience trauma, because one of the vestiges of all of the harms that we've been talking about, the systems and structures of slavery and the exploitation that followed, is that we fail to see trauma in the Black girl body. We fail to recognize when a Black girl is experiencing harm. Instead, we focus on her reactions to that harm. Say she has a bad attitude, talk about her behaviors, talk about what clothes she's wearing, talk about how loud she is, all those things, rather than responding to the actual trauma. And so the invitation when we bring in a structural analysis is for us to then say, let's not necessarily only focus on what is happening and how she's responding to this, but let's take a look at how all of these institutions are at play in protecting her or examining some of the conditions around her that deepen the harm. One of the things that I'd like to talk about is, for schools to be part of the tapestry of healing. A tapestry is a combination of multiple visual elements, right? So we know that in order for one institution to be a part of a tapestry of healing, that we need multiple elements to be a part of this healing process in order for the systems and organizations and institutions to be responsive to the harm of this one child and all of the other children like her.
I see a lot of head nodding. I can't see you all out there, but I'm sure you're agreeing. But I want to just open up the conversation from the context of what we've heard so far and have whoever wants to jump in here talk about how your own upbringing and experience as a Black girl informs your experience and where you are now, especially as you hear what has been said so far.
I'd like to
go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll go next.
I'd like to hop in that. First off, I'd like to say that out of many of the brown and Black girls that I know, that I am one of the lucky ones. I grew up with so many young Black and brown girls who didn't make it past 16, who didn't make it past 18, who got pregnant before they got into high school, who got pregnant before they graduated from high school. So seeing chaos, seeing violent environments has become such a norm to us girls that it is almost a second thought or a reflex to react off of that. Many Black girls don't have outlets. Many Black girls don't have mentors. Many Black girls don't have support groups. They don't have support systems. So when I say I'm one of the lucky ones, I truly mean that. One of my most life-changing experiences, I was in middle school, and I had a really good friend of mine who was not in the best of family situations. Lots of abuse, lots of violence in the home. And seeing that, witnessing that, made me realize, wow, I'm lucky. Like I'm blessed that that I didn't have to go through that, you know, that I didn't have to experience some of the most vile, some of the most heartbreaking experiences that Black girls and brown girls go through on a daily basis. Now, I'm not saying I didn't have a hard life, but Black girls, especially young Black girls, especially today in the present, we are carrying so much baggage. We are carrying children that aren't being taken care of by the parents. We're carrying not knowing what we're gonna eat when we get home, not knowing if we're gonna have a house to go to when we leave school. And a lot of passersby don't recognize that, or they choose not to pay attention to it. I feel that every bad attitude, every eye roll, every neck roll is a cry for help. Mm-hmm. Every curse word that comes out of our mouth, every forget you, this, that, you know, that's a cry for help. And I see it so clearly now because I have seen the upbringing. I have seen the trauma that Black girls hold in. And it is so important, and I cannot stress this enough, it is so important to treat Black girls with care, to treat them with gentleness, because you don't know what they're gonna go home to. As for my friend in middle school, unfortunately, she did not make it. She died at age 16. She was a singer like me. She wanted to be big. She wanted to do great things. But because of the lack of attention that people were giving her, she didn't have an escape. So, in conclusion, Black girls really are so mistreated. And truly, I'm trying not to cry. Black girls are so mistreated and so misused and often thrown off to the side. It's hurtful to know that in this room, I am loved, I'm supported, and I can tell by the energy that is being given off to me. But once I step outside of those doors, I'm just another Black girl to the passersby. I could be the next hashtag to the next passersby. They don't know who I am. They probably don't care about who I am. And that's what we need to change. We need to change the invisibility of Black girls and Black women. Because we are seen, we are here. Whether you want us to be or not, we're here. And we're gonna be here. We was here 1,000 years ago, we're gonna be here for the next 1,000 years. So, in conclusion, I just wanna say that there are many, many Black girls out here who are struggling, and all they need is an opportunity like me.
Whew, yes. Dr. K, you wanna
Yeah, I was actually getting ready to jump in and say something else, but I have to validate and co-sign my sister. A lot of what you shared is trauma, and sometimes we need a level set in that space, right? We use the word trauma. We've been traumatized for centuries, slavery, trauma. But what exactly does trauma look like? It looks differently for every person. The bare bones are there, experiencing a traumatic event, face on, witnessing a traumatic event, learning about the details of like what you just shared, a friend or a family member who experienced a traumatic event. And then there's prolonged trauma where you're just in an environment you can't even get out of. So as a child, through, domestic violence, family violence, these are cultures that you're living in on a regular basis. And it's very hard over the years to counsel girls who have been in these situations to help them find their worth when every day not only is the outside world telling you that you're not anything because you're a Black girl, but also when you come home and you are mistreated in very direct ways that I don't want to get too far into. But when you asked about personal experiences, Tracy, one thing that is key from my childhood all the way up through now and probably ongoing, I've already accepted it, so I'm good, is that when I was a child, my parents are from New York, my father was in the military, so safety was everything, period. So we would have, and this, you can laugh because I laugh about this with my parents, we had the lock on the door at the bottom, so, you can't get in. And then you had the boat lock. That was like standard because that's your regular apartment door. Then my dad went and bought another boat lock. So then there was 3 locks. And then there had the chain. And then my dad was like, we need another chain to put the lock on top of the chain. So eventually I was like, Daddy, before I get in the house, I'm gone. From school, somebody done picked me up, I'm gone. It's taking me too long to get in. But what did that start to create inside of me was the sense of inside of the home. I was a child inside of a home with there was 4 of us siblings. My parents are still together after 50 years. The love is there, but it was now I'm going outside of the home. The fear now exists. And so that developed for me an anxiety disorder. Because it's like I can trust in my circle, but I've been trained by my family to not trust the outside. So that meant going to school and all the different performing arts events I was involved in, every single sport, you name it, going to college. And so I had to learn through my own counseling how to set boundaries with my family so that as I'm experiencing these real life things that are happening to me inside of my home, that I don't have this ongoing visceral reaction and fear when I learn about what's happening still to our Black girls, like the lacrosse team. Right. That we just learned about. Like how I played sports. We went on so many softball trips, I can't even count. But then the whole bus gets pulled over. Right. I mean, so this is like another exposure of, here's my parents texting me, see, this is what I mean, you can't trust the world. I'm like, oh my God. I'm trying to work my way and myself back out of that. But being exposed to those different environments, be them traumatizing, loving, but still creating another environment, of thought outside of that has a significant impact.
Yes. Anybody else want to weigh in?
So Tracy, I would say, who's ever in your village, it matters. And that's a critical point for anyone in their life. I would say for me growing up, I had a praying grandmother, praying godparents, where no one left the dinner table until the grandfather dismissed you. That's rare now.
Yeah.
Understanding that I had people pour into me, didn't realize it at the time, but the blessings at a young age that was given to me. And one of the things that my grandmother has always told me from a child up, and I didn't understand it at the time, but it resonates with me now more so than ever. And she always said, there's some things that you cannot buy, and there's some things you do not sell, and that's your self-respect. And so when I say that, it's your village, who's around you, who's pouring into you. And so for our young Black girls, everybody has a different experience, but they all should be a part of our village.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. Yes, I know you want to applaud. I know. This is going to be hard because I'm like, oh, that was good too. So can we also talk about then it's important to know who's in your village, to be a part of a village. Who else can we talk about in terms of being responsible for addressing the crisis that we're talking about? Is it organizations? We talked about Columbus City Schools, but who else can be a part of the conversation? Dr. Roberts.
I mean, I think we as Black women, as adult women, have to be a part of the conversation. We have to lead the conversation, and we have to encourage our leaders in our community at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level to make sure that they are not creating laws or, in some cases, getting rid of laws that could negatively impact our Black girls and our Black young women. And we know that's happening. It's happening right in front of our eyes. And that is a huge concern for me as a public health leader, as a physician, that there could be a day in the very near future that our Black girls will not be able to access the healthcare services that they deserve. And I mean they deserve those services. And I know that whatever happens with this, it's going to disproportionately impact girls of color.
Anybody else want to comment along that line about this conversation about who's responsible for addressing this crisis?
I think everyone. One of the things I think that probably gets under my skin a lot, especially when it comes to, areas like this, anything related to people of color, diversity, mental health, everybody just assumes, oh, it's that group over there. Like, that's what they do. They're supposed to be the ones to take care of that. But because it impacts everybody, then it's everybody's business. So any group.
Yeah, so I actually talk a lot about like who's responsible because, and I wanted to intentionally weigh in here because obviously I think we all sit on this stage because we represent some element of who's involved and who should be responsible in this conversation. But also, again, in building out a village of care, it requires us to think about all the people who touch the lives of Black girls. And so policymakers are absolutely a part of that, in addition to the institutions and organizations that we each represent. And I will even put myself in that in terms of philanthropy, right?
Yes.
Being a part of that. I think that there is also a role for parents and other, I call them, in Pushout, I call sort of that group of concerned adults, like concerned community adults, right? Who can be, who can walk with Black girls, who can talk with Black girls, who sometimes have to serve as a proxy for parents who are not available to engage with other institutions and adults who are touching the lives of Black girls. A lot of times when we think about who needs to be in place, there are lots of assumptions sometimes that we make about who is in the life of this girl or who is the positive force in that life. And so sometimes it's not somebody who's blood related, but we have very expansive definitions of family in our communities. And so thank God for that, right? And so as we think about all of the folks who can serve as proxies, all of the organizations that do organizing work, that are civic minded, that are not tapped enough, really, to be a part of the conversation, both in terms of advocacy, in terms of direct service, in terms of being able to mentor and engage in terms of who can hire, who can prepare. Like there's a lot I say there's something for everybody, right? There's something for everybody. We just have to be really intentional about where we enter, right? Anna Julia Cooper gave us that framework, like the Black woman can choose when and where she enters. And so when we think about when and where we want to enter, how we are going to expose ourselves, our communities, to all of the great things that Black girls provide and really work from not a deficit model, but this model of strength, then we're able, I think, to do the very things that I found so compelling about what was happening at Columbus City's prep school for girls and the conversations that Stephanie and I had very early on in this work about where you locate the resilience, where do you locate the community that will respond to the root causes of some of these conditions, so that we're not just saying this girl has a bad attitude, these girls are fighting, let's call the police, or these girls are fighting and now we have to call the parents and this child is suspended. And then when you talk to the girl, like, you know, what did you do on your suspension? And she's like, oh, I was fighting, right? So there's not a lot of engagement there. But I do think that when we think about what it is that is our sphere of influence, our sphere of control, that's where we enter. So a lot of times folks will say, these are big issues, right? Like Monique, you're talking about these decades-long, centuries-long structures. How am I supposed to interfere? How am I supposed to do something with that? Think about what you control. Each of us has a sphere of influence in decision-making. Start there. That's the invitation with all of this. Pushout, when I talk about Pushout, I'm talking about the policies, practices, conditions, and the prevailing consciousness. So what we think about Black girls that renders them vulnerable to future contact with the juvenile court and criminal legal system. Each of us can play a role at some point in one of those areas, even if it's just our own prevailing consciousness. What we think about Black girls. All of us can do work on that, right?
So we're going to dig into that, what we think about them, and talk about adultification and why is it so prevalent for Black girls? How does it look when Black girls are viewed through that lens of adultification? And you don't have to answer all the questions. Somebody else can jump in on that.
Well, I think the most obvious one for me, and I remember former council member Tyson actually brought it to my attention, but when, and I apologize that I don't remember her name, but when the young girl was shot by the police because she was fighting outside her home.
Ma'Khia Bryant.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I remember the way they described her, and how the situation was handled. It was very much as if she was an adult when she was a child. And that was really the first time I was like, when Councilmember Tyson said it to me, I was like, you're right. You're absolutely right. They treated her like an adult. So is that because of how she presented? Is it her size? Is it her, her stature? What was it that made them treat her in that manner? And, when I looked into it and read up about adultification of Black girls, it often had nothing to do with their stature or their size. It just was because they were a Black girl. And that is a problem. That is a problem.
Yeah.
And that is so unfair to our young Black girls who are, you mentioned, having this responsibility of caring for younger siblings. They have these adult responsibilities sometimes at home, and then they get labeled as an adult outside in the community when they don't have the tools to respond as an adult.
Stephanie, can you talk about that a bit from when you were in the school building and now in your role?
Yeah, I think that, and we had a wonderful event today with girls. I think sometimes we stop Black girls in the midst of their joy. And so if I'm laughing, it's, you're too loud, stop laughing, pay attention. I think that authoritative technique, so to speak, that we were trained as educators because that's the system that we grew up in, right? And so it's the cycle repeating itself, and then policing their bodies, and your clothes are too tight, and the fixation on how they look and how they respond. And again, making them solve their own problems. So when a student comes with a problem, or we'll say, well, what do you think? Or try to make them make it right. And it's a lack of training. Coming up in the new programs for educators, that's a component that's missing. And so that's something that we have to retrain and reprogram ourselves. And even I, as a principal, had to start with self-awareness. So my entire staff, for us to get to the point where we were in Pushout, we had to strip ourselves down to that vulnerability, to say that we were part of implementing bias towards our own girls and our own children. And we had to teach them to hold us accountable. So they had that safe space to advocate for themselves
and remind us when we were treating them less than children. And so I think the first step is let's allow the kids to be joyful. We don't all have to walk in a straight line. We don't all have to sit in the cafeteria quiet. Right? Right. And that's an adult issue, and that's something that we have to let go of our fear and the control that we want of this picture of how we want our students. Because when you go into the suburbs, children are free in the hallways, they're loud, it's crowded, they're having a great time, and it's a wonderful experience. But I think so often we start that school to prison pipeline with treating them with those routines, and we have to break those. Is there a role for parents in that as well? You talk about training educators, but I mean, do parents need to have a little bit of a mindset shift? I think as an administrator, you have to share your expectations and your core values with your parents, and you have to also understand theirs. So having activities where parents come in and they understand your school culture and they're a part of your school culture. So we have family ambassadors in Columbus City Schools. So now they're a part of the school. They're bringing parents in so that we're really working together and that the students see us working together. So it's not I'm going to call my mom or my mom's going to come up, or it's like, hey, let's call your mom, right? So I think it's just changing that paradigm for everyone, but the parents are an integral part, and they have to see that we're all on the same page. And Emma can testify. I told her mom, let me just have her for this last year, Mom. Just trust me with her. So when Emma didn't show up at school, I'm on the phone. Do I need to come and get you? Get ready. Had her middle school teacher picked her up tonight. I said, make sure she's here on time. And Miss Reed, who was also in the film, went and got Emma. And so it's some of those things where we have to work together, because as parents, we're tired, right? Yes. We're just trying to make it. And so, I think we have to partner while we have them for 8 hours a day and sometimes more. We have to have that shared experience. We can't make them have one set of expectations at school and a culture and a time, and then a different experience when they go home. We have to work to balance, our young people out.
I'd like to add on to that. So I was, as of all of us, we were all CCS students for 12 years. One of the biggest things that Black girls have to deal with, again, the policing, the tone policing, sit down, be quiet, you're too loud. I often like to think that they do this because they want us to be smaller. They know how great we are, and they know that we know our greatness. I'm loud because there's joy in my voice. I'm laughing because I have all this, I have things to laugh about, laugh to keep from crying. Like I said before, a lot of Black girls don't go home to great living situations. So a lot of their joy, a lot of their comfort comes from being in a space where they feel comfortable. I feel that if you have Black girls and brown girls in your classrooms, in your schools, feeling comfortable enough to laugh and joke around, that's a good thing. You should not be policing that. It might be disruptive a few times, yes, but that is a good thing. That means you are doing something correct. That means you are doing something correct.
Thank you for that perspective. That's good. So can we just kind of get a little check? What did you all think of the movie? Show of applause, or the documentary? I know it feels good to hear that, I just want you to get that love. But I was struck by a number of things, and I wanted to bring in the chief here on this and have you talk about, what you saw in the documentary and how girls are engaged and disciplined in schools.
And so when I was looking at the movie and reflecting on it, and I watched it before I got here, a lot of questions I wanted to know was who was advocating for the young ladies? Where was the conversations that needed to take place before each one of those incidents occurred? And it seemed like there was no voice in the room for the girls. And I think that's where it needs to start, where you have a voice in the room for them, realizing that they are still just kids. And if that voice is the administrator, if that voice is the parent, those voices need to be heard in the room to advocate for our young girls.
Do you have insight into training or things changing in terms of training for law enforcement? I mean, I know you're at The Ohio State University. How firm that friendship. It's a great place. But I just wondered, because you are our expert.
It is a great place. No, I really would say that all starts with leadership of your agency. The type of culture that you're creating for your agency, the type of officers that you recruit, the type of officers you hire, and the type of officers you retain. If that training is not a part of your culture or your priority, then you have things that occur that you're trying to explain or justify later.
And just point out, just in case you all forgot, she's leading a police agency. I just want to say that.
And Tracy, if
I appreciate that. I actually was a co-PI on a study that looked at school resource officers and girls of color. And, you're absolutely right that it begins with the leadership of an agency. I have very strong opinions, and a professional opinion and a personal opinion, about who needs to be in schools for it to be part of a tapestry of healing. And the presence of law enforcement is not necessary in schools to surveil. I think when there is a significant disruption, the relationships absolutely have to be there so that law enforcement can do the work of law enforcement. But one of the primary findings from the work that we did was that the school resource officers who were in the K through 12 space, who were working with girls, had very little, if any, training and discussion about how to work with girls of color. So in your question about like who was advocating for the girls? Nobody. They never talked about girls. And so they were relying on only what they knew. They were relying on their own biases, their own understandings about girls, their own misogyny in some ways. And so that was very harmful for the girls. But the other thing that I think that was most important from that research was that when you talk to law enforcement officers and you talk to girls, the thing that emerged the most was that those SROs who led with resource and were intending to be a resource for the students, those were the ones who had the strongest relationships with girls. And when they leaned into the relationships, they were actually leaning into the thing that didn't make them a police officer. It made them a good youth development worker. And so as we were thinking about who then needs to be in schools, and even who you call when there is a disruption in the school, you need to have folks with that kind of awareness and training and engagement. But I always worry that sometimes we think we can train people out of the scenarios that we see in the film, and it's not necessarily about the training, because a lot of those folks don't need to be in the schools at all. But it's not only about training, it's also about how we structure and where we put our money so that when young people are experiencing disruption, they have access to a counselor, not necessarily a law enforcement officer, that they have access to other adults who can serve as safety, folks who can intervene and provide safety in other ways, restorative circles. Like there's a host of responses that could come before we engage law enforcement, and often our response is to rely on law enforcement to do everything, and they just can't.
And I agree with what you just said, but also understanding that the first time a student encountered that SRO, it should not be an enforcement role. Exactly. Those relationships should be built at the beginning of the school year, throughout the day, that it never even gets to that point, because they see that person still as just a child, and you're trying to help them navigate whatever that situation may be.
But, if I could just add something that Emma had said earlier, I think we all, whether we're children or adults, have to improve our conflict resolution skills.
That's right.
And so, Emma said like some of her peers are acting out, cursing, doing things because of the trauma. And so I think we have to remember, instead of asking individuals who are acting out, who are misbehaving, what's wrong, we need to ask them, how can I help you? We need to flip that so that it's more of a positive than a negative. We have this thing, my mom, sister, and I joke all the time. My mom will say, what's wrong? And my sister and I will always say, what's right? Let's flip that. Let's talk about the positive and not the negative.
Yeah.
Or even what happened. Like that's the question that we often ask when there's been a disruption is what happened? Because sometimes if you ask, how can I help you? If that person is not ready to receive that question, you can't do nothing for me, right? But if you ask what happened, it's also a way to tease out some of the pieces. But I think what we're getting to is absolutely right, that we've got to switch how we're asking these questions and think about how we're inviting girls to stand in their own agency and to be able to articulate what it is that is actually causing the disruption.
And I also feel like relationship building has to be a part of that, though. If you don't have relationship building, you literally cannot expect anyone, girls, myself, anyone on this panel, just to open up and answer and respond to that question. Asking someone, are you okay? That's a great question. But if you don't have a relationship, then you may not get anything out of that response that's going to be supportive enough to help them move beyond where they are.
A little comfort goes a very long way for students, especially with Black girls. In a school setting that's strictly educational, not a lot of people make it known that not only are the teachers and the educators there for you, but they care about you. So that is definitely goes out to all the educators in here. A little comfort does, in fact, go a very long way.
Thank you for that, Emma. All right, I have in my hand some questions from you, the audience. So we'll go through these. I want to say round robin, but we're not. We're just going to go through them. We'll just jump in, get in where you fit in, as they say. How as a community can we talk about STIs and HIV and healthy sex practices to our girls?
I would love to start off with that.
Okay.
I would love to start off with that. I was literally just having this conversation. Please stop acting as if sex is a taboo subject. Sex is not taboo. It's very natural. It happens a lot. And since we are in environments, especially as teenagers, where we're exposed to a lot of things that we should have not been exposed to, we are going to get very curious. So therefore, if you give us the resources that we need at a young age, that way we know what to do to prevent teen pregnancies, to prevent HIVs, to prevent STIs, then we bring the rates down. We're starting to act more responsibly. Like I said before, I mentioned before, thank you. As I've mentioned before, I've had I know a lot of Black and brown girls who got pregnant before the age of 21. I mean, from 16 through 18, they're dropping babies like flies. And if they had known about sex education, or if sex education was taught in schools, or even if an adult reached out to them, is like, hey, I know you're around the age where you're getting curious, here's what you need to do, boom, 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 it would have stopped so many teen pregnancies. So once again, please stop acting like sex is a taboo subject and start reaching out to young people about sex education.
Well, and Emma, I am very appreciative that you feel so strongly about that. I think I just want to let everyone know that, we're trying to educate our youth today about sexual health and taking care of your body and preventing those STIs and those pregnancies. But Ohio is the only state in the nation that does not have health curriculum in sex ed in the school system. That's a problem. And so we've got to work around that and make sure we educate our kids. And you're right, sex is not a taboo. We all got here because of sex, right? That's how we all got here. And so we need to be able to talk about it. And, I found myself, I was talking to some young kids, like between the ages of probably 10 and 13 a few months ago, and they were asking me about the different services we have at the health department. And when I started talking about our sexual health clinic, I started panicking, like, oh my God, I don't know if these parents want their kids to know about our sexual health clinic and, what's gonorrhea and what's chlamydia. And, some of the kids were looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And, one of the moms later said to me, she said, you started talking about sex. And I said, yeah, because that's what we do. That's a service we provide. But we as a society need to normalize that.
How do we balance supporting our girls in the midst of traumatic experiences with exposing their personal business and dealings, all for the sake of advocacy?
Ooh, that's difficult for advocacy.
Oh, actually, I have strong. I have strong beliefs about protecting girls, and we should not ever share personal business in that way without consent and engagement of those girls and the adults in their lives. I also had a strong. Actually, so in reference to Pushout, I'll just talk about it because obviously the girls were willing to share a lot of personal information, and it was really important to me, and I made it a norm in the space that every young person who participated in that film had a community or of support around her, so that if she were willingly sharing something, that she had somebody once we left and the cameras, shut down, that would still be there to support. In fact, I'll share with this community, I know this is recorded, but I won't name names, but we actually turned away a significant offer from a big Hollywood production company for the film because they could not make the same promise that girls' information would be treated that way. And it was just that important to me that we walk away from the money if it meant that girls would be exploited. I consider that exploitation. And so I don't do that for applause. I do that just to say that it is a really important part of how we engage our grantee partners at Grantmakers for Girls of Color. It's been a routine part of how we think about engaging youthful voices to make sure that if young people are coming forth and sharing their stories, that we treat them with respect, but we also invest in the community around them and also try to provide some supports for the community around them so that it's not just a one-shot, one-off. That happens too much in advocacy spaces, activist spaces, and it's not right.
Can you ask the question again? Something, I said,
How
advocacy.
do we balance
lost in the
supporting our
sauce.
girls?
Dr.
It was
Force is
good,
an
it was
amazing
good.
speaker.
How do we support our girls in the midst of traumatic experiences with exposing their personal business and dealings for the sake of advocacy?
Without exposing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I, in my master's program, I had a choice. You want to write this thesis or you want to implement something? And I said, well, I care about black girls, so I'm going to implement something. So I created a 12-week teenage pregnancy prevention program, and very hard balance. The only request that I had, I did not ignore the sexual education component, but please allow me to bring people in who look like you to teach you about your body. And so inside of that small cohort of girls was that camaraderie, was that understood sense of confidentiality, that what happens inside of this space, we're not gonna go out in the school and start, and they held that. But the hardest part in a space like that is after parents give consent to allow their child to be in a space like that, and then want to come in and know every single thing about what's happening in the group or in the clinical space. So that to me is the biggest challenge. But if you can get a group together and build on that and expose them to the truths about their bodies, even working in higher education, so many girls coming into my office that were sexually active had no idea about their bodies.
Wow.
So I spent a lot of time educating, in that space. They felt comfortable because it was confidential.
I think I'm getting the high sign, but this has been a good conversation. And I'm going to sneak in one more question because that's what I do, and the producer's not in my ear. I can't see her over there, so I'm going to act like I don't see her. Love you. I would like to just have somebody answer the question, what type of resources are available to help Black girls deal with mental health without being stigmatized? It's Mental Health Awareness Month. We should talk about this every day. Great. And so I need somebody to give us some answers.
Well, there are lots of mental health services available to our community here in Columbus, but particularly to our young girls. Columbus Public Health is in many of Columbus City schools providing services about mental health services, as well as in our rec centers where they're providing prevention services, trainings, trying to uplift our youth to give them better coping skills, because we all know our youth today have challenges with coping skills. I mean, I can speak for my generation. When I was growing up, if you took a picture, you had to wait for it to get developed, right? Or maybe you had a Polaroid camera that spit it out immediately, but you didn't get to see it on your phone and quickly see it, you know? So that's just one example of how our kids today just are so accustomed to this instant gratification. So we have to give them coping skills, and that's what some of the services we do, both at Columbus City Schools as well as in our rec centers that make it accessible. All of the schools have access to a school nurse. I'll let you speak about some of the services that happen in the schools, but I know that they're here and they can provide that service for kids who need it or want that.
Yeah, and I think it's important for schools, if you have a student in school, to ask them, is there at least one adult that you can go to as a person of support? And if your child says no, that's a call to the administrator. Mm-hmm. And as an educator and administrator, you should make sure that every student has a connection with an adult. And so if you put every student's name on the wall and every student's name is not chosen, then that's staff development and that's a recommitment to your students. So it can start as simple as a support, and then that person can help direct you to the resource that you need. So I would start even that small within a school, is to ask any child or student that you come in contact, is there at least one adult that you could go to for support and you feel safe? And we would hope the answer is yes, but if it's no, that's not the end of the conversation.
Yeah, and actually, so the research behind that is that when a student has at least one adult on campus that he or she can go to as a person of support, the likelihood that they experience an out-of-school suspension is dropped by 75%.
Wow.
And so when we think about the importance of just having that kind of relationship is really important. I also just want to add quickly, there's therapy for Black girls on Instagram, there's Planet Venus, there's a lot of organizing that's happening within the mental health community and among therapists, Black women therapists especially, who want to be a resource to Black girls. And so if you don't already know about the Black Girl Freedom Fund and the work that we're doing at Grantmakers for Girls of Color, please look us up, because part of what we're doing is organizing some of these resources so that we can share them out more broadly. But there are organizing bodies of Black women therapists largely who want to provide and are providing services for Black girls.
Yeah, and our Adam H. Board of Franklin County, we are partnered with over 30 plus providers that provide the direct services for mental health and addiction. And so on our website, you can easily go to our website, adamh.org, and locate by specificity, by category, the type of behavioral health or addiction service that you are looking to get involved in.
That's good.
Ladies and gentlemen, can we give a round of applause for this panel? I'm calling names out. Dr. Lashunda Roberts, Stephanie Patton, School Leadership Coach, Columbus City Schools. Kimberly Spears McNatt, Chief of Police, The Ohio State University. Dr. K from Adam H. And our graduate, Emma Arnold, Columbus City Schools. 2022! And Dr. Monique Morris, President and CEO of Grantmakers for Girls of Color. Thank you so much.
Wow, what a powerful event. Thank you so much to this panel. Thank you, Tracy, for hosting. What did we learn tonight? Something your Board of Education likes to say is, before student outcomes can change, adult behavior must change. And that means we have to be brave enough to continue in these spaces and continue to push. And as Black women in particular, our superpower is really being able to speak out against oppression. And it is a strength, right? And we learned that we all have the power to influence our sphere of control. And we must dare to enter it. And just think, if we all can enter our own sphere in a coordinated way at the same time, what impact that has across the system. And as our Black Girl Magic superintendent likes to say, the power of one that is then multiplied. So we as a community need to come together, because this is what we also know. Black girls are worthy. Black girls can have joy. Black girls deserve our love. Black girls are not invisible. And black girls are children. And as a mom of a black girl, which is probably the hardest thing I do all day long, thank you for being here to support our black girls. And we have a lot of work to do, and I'm proud of all the work that's being done and the work that is to come. So thank you so much tonight for coming. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to everyone that put this on, to our AV and tech team. Thank you, Tracy, for moderating. And don't forget to scan your QR code on the way out.